The fluorescent lights at Whole Foods in Bethesda were doing that thing they do where they make everything look slightly too real, slightly too sharp, like you're seeing the world through somebody else's prescription. I was standing behind a cart I hadn't filled, next to a husband I thought I knew, listening to him scream at me in front of a checkout line that had gone completely silent. The woman behind us was pretending to look at a magazine. The cashier, a kid who couldn't have been older than 19, kept his eyes locked on the scanner like it was the most fascinating piece of technology he'd ever encountered. "Are you out of your goddamn mind, Marin? You want my mother to pay you back for groceries? She's 71 years old. She lives on Social Security. What is wrong with you? My name is Marin Whitlock. I'm 32 years old. I work as a hospital administrator at Sibley Memorial in Northwest DC, and 3 weeks before that moment in the checkout line, I had paid off the last $47,000 of my student loans with money I'd been quietly saving since I was 24. My husband Bennett did not know this. My mother-in-law Doreen did not know this. The only person who knew was my best friend Talia, who had cried with me over Aperol spritzes at a wine bar in Adams Morgan the night the payment cleared. I am telling you this because context matters. Because what looked from the outside like a wife refusing to be generous to her elderly mother-in-law was actually the final exhale of a woman who had been holding her breath for 2 years. But let me back up. Doreen moved in with us in the spring. Her husband, Bennett's father, had passed away the previous fall from a heart attack so sudden it left all of us reeling. She had been living in their house in Annapolis, a 3-bedroom colonial they'd paid off in the 90s, and she said the house felt too big, too empty, too full of ghosts. Bennett, who was her only child, said of course she could come stay with us while she figured out what to do next. He said it without asking me. He told me on a Tuesday night while I was washing dishes, and when I turned around with soap suds dripping down my forearms, he was already on the phone with her, telling her she could come in 2 weeks. I want to be clear. I love Doreen, or I thought I did. She had been pleasant to me at every holiday, every birthday dinner, every Sunday brunch where she'd commented mildly on the carbohydrate content of whatever I'd ordered. She was the kind of woman who wore cream-colored cardigans and small gold earrings and who always brought a hostess gift, usually a candle that smelled like Christmas regardless of the season. I had no reason in those first weeks to think she would be anything other than a quiet, grateful house guest. She arrived with 17 suitcases. I counted them. While I was bringing in the 8th one from her Lexus, and Bennett was inside making her a cup of tea. 17 suitcases, 4 boxes labeled K-Kitchen, 2 boxes labeled Christmas, and a steamer trunk that, I would later learn, contained nothing but shoes. "Just until I figure things out," she said, settling herself onto our couch like a queen returning to a throne she'd briefly forgotten she owned. "A few weeks, dear. A month at most." That was March. It was now October. In the 7 months between her arrival and that night at Whole Foods, my kitchen had been reorganized 4 times. My spice rack, which I had built alphabetically over the course of 6 years, was now arranged by what Doreen called frequency of use, which seemed to mean that the herbs she liked were at eye level and the ones I cooked with were on the bottom shelf behind a row of her vitamins. My coffee maker had been moved to make room for her tea kettle. My cast iron skillets, which I'd been seasoning since I was in graduate school, had been lovingly washed with dish soap, which is to say, destroyed. When I cried about it, quietly, in our bedroom, Bennett told me I was being dramatic. "She's trying to help," he said. "She's lonely. She just lost Dad." I did not lose Dad. I did not have a dad to lose, not in the traditional sense, because my own father had been a hands-off accountant who paid his child support on time and remembered my birthday roughly every other year. So when Bennett said she'd just lost Dad, what he meant was, I just lost Dad, and what I heard was, you don't get to be tired because she has lost more than you. I started keeping a list. Not on paper, just in my head, of things that had been moved, broken, replaced, criticized. The way she folded my towels into thirds instead of halves. The way she rearranged the framed photos on the mantel so that the picture of her and Bennett from his college graduation was front and center, and the picture from our wedding had been moved to the side. The way she would, every morning, walk into the kitchen while I was making coffee and say, "Oh, I would have made it for you, sweetheart. You should have called me." She made my coffee one Saturday. She made it with the grounds she preferred, a brand I found bitter, and when I told her gently that I liked my coffee a certain way, she put her hand on my wrist and said, "Maren, honey, coffee is coffee." Bennett laughed. He laughed. That was the moment, if I'm being honest with myself, when something in me started turning, not breaking, not yet. Turning, the way a key turns in a lock you didn't know you were standing in front of. There were other things. There were so many other things. The way she'd answer our home phone, the one we kept for our doorbell camera, like she was the lady of the house. The way she'd refer to our guest room as my room. The way she signed my own birthday card from Bennett that year, Mom and Bennett, in her looping cursive, as if she'd contributed to the gift, which had been a pair of earrings I'd actually picked out myself on Bennett's instruction. The way she started joining us on date nights. The first time it happened, Bennett came home from work on a Friday and said, "Mom's feeling a little down. Mind if she joins us for dinner tonight?" I had reservations at a small Italian place in Georgetown that I'd been trying to get into for months. I said okay because what else do you say? The second time it happened 2 weeks later, I didn't say okay. I said actually I was really hoping it could be just us tonight. And Bennett looked at me like I'd suggested we drown a puppy. "She's family, Maren." I said yes. I always said yes. By July, I was driving past my own house in the evenings, sitting in the parking lot of the CVS on River Road, calling Talia and crying into my Bluetooth. By August, I was sleeping on the couch in my own basement 2 or 3 nights a week, telling Bennett I had insomnia and didn't want to wake him. The truth was, I couldn't stand to be in the same bed with him after the way he'd looked at me when I'd said I wanted my house back. The truth was, I was beginning to understand that I had married a man who would always choose his mother over me. Now. The folder. In September, on a Wednesday that started like any other Wednesday, I was looking for our home insurance paperwork. Because a tree branch had come down during a storm and dented the gutter, Bennett kept all our paperwork in a metal filing cabinet in his home office, a room I generally avoided because Doreen had taken to using it as her afternoon reading room. She was out at her hair appointment. Bennett was at work. I had the house, for the first time in months, to myself. I opened the filing cabinet. I found the insurance folder, and behind it, in a manila folder labeled in Bennett's handwriting, "Ease Taught Planning," I found something that made my hands go cold. It was a draft of a new will, Bennett's will, dated 3 weeks earlier. In it, he had left everything to his mother. The house, which we owned jointly, his retirement accounts, which were considerable, his half of our joint savings, the car, the boat we kept in Annapolis, even, and I'm not making this up, his half of the cat. There was no mention of me. None. Not as a beneficiary, not as a contingent, not as anything. It was as if I had been deleted from his life on paper while still cooking him dinner every night. I sat down on the floor of the office. I read it twice, 3 times. I checked the signature page, and there it was, his looping signature, witnessed by 2 people whose names I didn't recognize, notarized, filed, real. And underneath it, in the same folder, I found something worse, a document drawn up by a lawyer in Annapolis titled Transfer of Ownership. In it, Bennett was being asked to transfer his interest in our home, the one we'd bought together 5 years earlier with a down payment that had come, in part, from an inheritance from my grandmother, into a trust. The trust was called the Whitlock Family Trust. The trustee was Doreen. I am not a lawyer. I work in healthcare administration, but I know what a trust is. I know what it means when you put a house into a trust whose trustee is your mother. It means that if anything ever happens to your marriage, if anything ever happens to your marriage, if anything ever happens to you, that house does not pass to your wife. It passes to the trustee to be distributed according to the terms of the trust. And I had a feeling, a sick, dark, certain feeling, that the terms of that trust did not include me. I closed the folder. I put it back exactly where I'd found it. I went into the bathroom and threw up the iced coffee I'd had for breakfast. And then I called Talia. "Don't say anything," she said. Talia is a paralegal. She's been a paralegal for 11 years at a firm that specializes in family law. Don't say a word to him. Don't change anything. Don't act differently. I'm going to put you in touch with someone tomorrow. The someone was a woman named Frances Okonkwo, a divorce attorney in D.C. who had the kind of office where every plant was thriving and every chair was upholstered in something that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I met with her on a Thursday afternoon, told her I was at lunch, and showed her the photos I'd taken on my phone of every page of that folder. She read them. She tapped her pen on her desk. She said, "Maren, how attached are you to staying in that marriage?" I started to cry. She handed me a tissue. She said, "Take your time. I'm not going to pressure you, but I want you to know that what your husband has done is not normal. It is not the action of a man who plans to spend the rest of his life with you. It is the action of a man who is preparing, with the help of his mother, to financially erase you." I asked her what I should do. She told me, in detail. Over the next 4 weeks, while Doreen was rearranging my pantry and Bennett was bringing her flowers on the way home from work, I quietly did everything Frances Okonkwo told me to do. I opened a checking account at a credit union in Silver Spring that Bennett did not know about. I moved my paycheck deposits. I transferred my half of our joint savings, which, by our prenup, the prenup his lawyer had drafted, by the way, the prenup I had signed without reading carefully because I was 27 and in love, I was entitled to. I called my retirement plan administrator and changed my beneficiary from Bennett to my younger sister. I made an appointment with a notary and drafted a new will of my own, leaving everything to my sister, my 2 nieces, and a small bequest to Talia for the wine. I paid off my student loans. I did not tell anyone. I started a paper trail. Every time Doreen did something, anything, that could be considered evidence of her involvement in the financial reshaping of my marriage, I wrote it down. The day she said at dinner, "You know, Bennett, the smart thing to do is to make sure everything is protected. Family first." The day she handed Bennett a business card for an estate attorney in Annapolis. The day, and this one nearly broke me, that I overheard her on the phone in the guest room saying, "Once it's all in the trust, she can't touch a thing. He just needs to sign." I wrote it all down. Dates, times, direct quotes. And then I waited. I waited for her to overplay her hand. I knew she would. Women like Doreen always do. She overplayed it at Whole Foods. It was a Saturday morning in mid-October. Bennett and I had planned to go grocery shopping, which had become, in our marriage, a chore I'd inherited entirely after Doreen moved in, because she had preferences, and Bennett did not want to be the one to navigate them. She didn't usually come with us. That morning she did. "I'll just grab a few things," she said, climbing into the back seat of our car like we were chauffeuring her. "I want to make a nice dinner for the 3 of us tonight. Bennett's favorite." Bennett's favorite is beef Wellington, a dish Doreen has made approximately 4 times in 7 months, and which costs, when you factor in the tenderloin and the foie gras she insists on putting in it, somewhere north of $120 in ingredients alone. I should have known. I should have known by the way she said a few things. I should have known by the way Bennett wouldn't quite look at me on the drive over. We got to Whole Foods. Doreen took the cart. She wheeled it briskly away from us toward the back of the store. Bennett and I stood awkwardly in the produce section, and I asked him what was happening. "She just wants to pick out a few things for tonight," he said. "We can do our shopping after." We did not do our shopping after. Doreen filled the cart. She filled it with 2 beef tenderloins from the butcher counter at $58 a pound. She filled it with foie gras from the specialty case. She filled it with a wedge of aged Comté that cost $42. She filled it with 3 bottles of Dom Perignon, which she said were for an occasion. She filled it with imported chocolates, with caviar from a refrigerated display I had never even noticed existed, with a tin of saffron that cost $91, with truffle oil, with 2 pounds of jumbo lump crab meat, with a bouquet of peonies that were out of season and therefore astronomical, with a box of macarons from the pastry counter, with bone marrow with veal demi-glace, with a small jar of Marcona almonds that cost $26 and looked, to my eye, identical to regular almonds. By the time we got to the checkout, the cart was overflowing. I had picked up nothing. I had not bought a single thing. My shopping list, which included chicken thighs and frozen broccoli and the store-brand Greek yogurt I liked, was still folded in my back pocket. The cashier, the 19-year-old, began scanning. The total climbed $300, $500, $700. By the time he reached the Dom Perignon, we were at $948. The peonies pushed us over $1,000. The final total, when he hit the button, was $1,043.78. Doreen was standing next to the cart, holding her purse like a small dog she was protecting. The cashier said, "Mom, will you be paying for this together or separately?" I looked at Doreen. Doreen looked at Bennett. Bennett looked at me. And then Bennett said very quietly, "Maren, can you grab your card? I want you to understand. I want you to understand exactly what happened in my chest in that moment. It was not anger. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that arrives so completely you can almost hear it click into place like a bone setting." "No," I said. I said it at a normal volume. I was not raising my voice. I was looking at my husband, the man I had married 5 years earlier in a small ceremony at a vineyard in Virginia. And I was saying no, the way you'd say no thank you to a second helping of pasta. Bennett's face went red. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean I'm not paying for this. I didn't choose any of it. I'm not eating most of it. This is your mother's grocery cart. She can pay for it." "Maren." His voice was a hiss. "Maren, are you serious right now? In front of the cashier?" "Bennett, I'm not paying." Doreen behind me made a small sound, a soft, hurt sound, the sound of a woman who had practiced being a victim her entire life. "Oh, sweetheart, I don't mind. I just thought, well, it's for all of us, isn't it?" "It's for you," I said without turning around. "You picked it. You can pay for it." And that was when Bennett snapped. "Are you out of your goddamn mind, Mand? You want my mother to pay you back for groceries? She's 71 years old. She lives on Social Security. What is wrong with you?" The line behind us went silent. I want to tell you that I felt strong. I want to tell you that I delivered some kind of devastating one-liner that the entire Whole Foods broke into applause for. I did not. I felt my face go hot. I felt my hands start to shake. I felt the woman behind me, the one with the magazine, very pointedly not looking at us. But I also felt that clarity. That clean, ringing clarity. I felt the folder, the will, the trust. The credit union account in Silver Spring. The new beneficiary on my 401k. The meeting with Francis Okonkwo. The paid-off student loans. All of it stacking up inside me like bricks in a wall. I looked at Bennett. I smiled. I did not feel like smiling, but I smiled because I'd read somewhere that smiling in a moment of conflict throws people off, and I wanted to throw him off. "All right, sweetheart," I said. "Get ready." He didn't know what I meant. The cashier didn't know what I meant. Doreen, judging by the slight tilt of her head, didn't know what I meant either. But I did. I pulled my own card out of my wallet, walked to the self-checkout, scanned my chicken thighs and my broccoli and my yogurt, paid $41.16, picked up my single bag, and walked out of Whole Foods. I did not look back. I got into the Uber I had quietly ordered while standing at self-checkout. I went home. I packed a suitcase. I drove to Talier's. Bennett called me 47 times that afternoon. Doreen called me 11 times. I did not answer. What I did do that evening, sitting on Talier's couch with a glass of wine and a notebook, was send one email. It was to Francis Okonkwo. It said, "I'm ready. File everything Monday." Monday morning, while Bennett was at work and Doreen was at her standing hair appointment, a process server delivered divorce papers to our front door. They were accepted eventually by a confused FedEx driver who Doreen, in a fit of panic, tried to send away. They counted as served. In the papers were several things: a petition for divorce, a request for an emergency order preventing the transfer of any joint marital assets, including, but not limited to, the house, the retirement accounts, and the boat, a subpoena for the documents in Bennett's filing cabinet, and a notice that I had, 2 weeks earlier, filed a complaint with the Maryland Bar against the attorney who had drafted the trust document. on the grounds that the attorney had attempted to facilitate the fraudulent transfer of marital property without the knowledge or consent of one of the property's joint owners. That last one, Francis had told me, was the kill shot. The lawyer in Annapolis, it turned out, was a friend of Doreen's from her bridge club. He was 68 years old and 4 years from retirement. He did not want a bar complaint. He did not want a deposition. What he wanted, very badly, was for this to go away. So he turned very quickly on Doreen. He produced emails. He produced texts. He produced a handwritten note on Doreen's monogrammed stationery that read, in part, "We need to move quickly before she catches on." Bennett doesn't have to know all the details. Just get him to sign. Bennett did not, it turned out, know all the details. He had thought, he told me later, through Francis, that the trust was a routine estate planning tool to protect the family. He had not understood that I was being written out. He had not understood that his mother was the trustee. He had signed because his mother had asked him to, and because his lawyer, the bridge club lawyer, had assured him it was standard. He was, in other words, exactly what I had always feared he was. Not a malicious man, but a weak one. A man who would let his mother set fire to his marriage and then complain about the smoke. I did not go back. Francis negotiated the divorce in 11 weeks. I kept the house, which I bought out from Bennett at fair market value, using my own savings and a small loan I qualified for easily, because my credit score, freed from his name, was excellent. I kept my retirement accounts intact. I kept my car. I kept the cat, who had loved me more anyway. Bennett kept the boat, the timeshare, and the Outer Banks that I'd always hated, and the contents of his closet. Doreen, as far as I know, moved back to Annapolis. She did not call me again. The day Bennett moved out, I stood in my living room, alone for the first time in 7 months, and I noticed the silence. It was not the heavy silence of a marriage ending. It was the light, expansive silence of a house exhaling. I walked through every room. I moved the framed wedding photo off the mantel and put it in a box for the basement. I moved the photo of Doreen and Bennett from his college graduation into the same box. I reorganized my spice rack alphabetically. I made myself a cup of coffee the way I liked it, with the grounds I preferred. I sat on my back porch. The maple tree my grandmother had planted in our yard the year we bought the house was just starting to turn red at the tips. The rosemary I had planted in a clay pot, the one Doreen had once told me was growing wrong, was thriving. I thought about that moment in the checkout line. I thought about, all right, sweetheart, get ready. I thought about how he had not known what I meant. I sipped my coffee. The light moved through the leaves of the maple. I knew exactly what I had meant, and now, finally, he did too. I think about that folder a lot. Not the divorce papers, not the trust document, but the manila one in Bennett's filing cabinet, the one that almost rewrote my life without my signature. I think about how close I came to never finding it, how easily a person can be erased on paper while still being asked to make coffee in the morning. What I've learned, sitting on this porch in the year since, is that the people who hurt you are almost never strangers. They are the ones who have studied you. Doreen knew exactly what kind of woman I was. She knew I was the kind of woman who would say yes to one more dinner, who would not make a scene, who had been trained somewhere along the way to confuse silence with grace. Bennett knew it too. The slow erosion of my kitchen, my evenings, my marriage was not an accident. It was a strategy, and it worked because I let it work. And I let it work because I had not yet decided that I was worth more than the peace I was buying with my own disappearance. Causes have consequences. That is the only law I really believe in now. Every time I said yes when I meant no, I was teaching them that my no did not exist. Every time I cried in the basement instead of speaking in the kitchen, I was teaching them that I could be moved into smaller and smaller spaces. The cart at Whole Foods was not the beginning of anything. It was the inevitable result of 7 months of small surrenders. The way out for me was not anger. Anger is loud, and anger is sloppy, and anger is easy to dismiss. The way out was the quiet thing. The paper trail, the credit union in Silver Spring. The phone calls I made on my lunch break, the friend who knew a lawyer. I want any woman watching this to understand that strength is not always the thing that makes noise. Sometimes, strength is the woman who walks into a divorce attorney's office at 1 o'clock on a Thursday and tells the truth out loud for the first time. Sometimes strength is the smile in the checkout line. I am not a religious person. I do not believe anyone is keeping score in any cosmic ledger. But I do believe that the way we treat ourselves teaches other people how to treat us. And I believe that intelligence, real intelligence, is the willingness to see what is actually happening, even when seeing it will cost you everything you thought you wanted. If you are sitting in a house that does not feel like yours, listening to a voice on the other side of the wall that does not love you, please understand that you are not crazy, you are not dramatic, you are not ungrateful, you are not ungrateful, you are simply, finally, paying attention. And the moment you start paying attention is the moment the rest of your life becomes possible. Bennett did not know what I meant when I said, "Get ready." I did. That was the only difference. And in the end, the only difference is the one that mattered.